Hello there.
Hi.
How are you doing this morning for you?
Yeah, it is 10:30. How are you, Toby?
Yeah, good, good. Getting to the end of the week and the end feels better than the beginning, so that's good. It's better when it's that way around. So
Always, 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 always. It's a dreary day here today in stateside. So
and then where are you? What city are you based in or what area? Oh,
I,
Charlotte.
yeah. Do you know where that is?
No, it rings a bell though, right? That's like in the south, isn't it? Charlotte? Charlotte.
It is. So it's between Washington, D.C. and Florida, Miami.
Nice. So you're not too far away then in terms of time zone from conversations like this if you're I always find it difficult when you're speaking to people on the West Coast because there's only very small slots that actually overlap. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But no, it's fine. I've had my morning walk, my breakfast, so things are good.
nice, nice.
Yeah.
So how have you been? How have you been since we set this up and you first commented on the post? What's been going on?
Yeah, I would say not too much. It's been, luckily it's been quiet. I have my business, but I also started teaching part-time at the university. So for us, it's that time of year again where students are going back and getting them in a routine, all of that good stuff, all of that good stuff.
What's it like to balance those two things? Because I've kind of got an eye on doing some kind of mix at some point of like kind of teaching and consultancy and stuff. But like as teaching can be quite all consuming, right? Sometimes like marking in particular, it can be very time consuming.
It can. It absolutely can. So most of my career has been as a university professor with undergraduate students. And so there's a lot of that marking and advising, that type of work. But right now I'm working with graduate students. And so the classes are significantly smaller. The type of work that they do is it's more reflective and things like that. And so it's actually has really informed. I started last semester in the spring, and the two courses that I was teaching really helped. One was a refresher for me, and then there were, based on the projects and the assignments, it was quite the contribution to my business. So I would say if you have the opportunity, it will definitely be an asset to your business.
Oh wow! So the people in your courses were actually potential customers, essentially, like they could,
No, not
or
from
just the
that.
content, yeah.
Yeah, from a content perspective, I have to say it was surprising. It was surprising as I was reading, preparing for lectures and things like that, going back and reading some theories. There were some new research that has been out. And so it's been a really great complement to my work.
Yeah, I have to say I found something similar. My PhD is more in literature, so it's more like a genuine side gig. But I did when I joined Filtered, I was had this brainwave of like, yeah, I need to apply these two things. So like the ability, even having the login details and stuff to read academic research,
Yeah.
and then that can be really, really powerful, I find, for professional work, because suddenly you're the person in the room that actually has some evidence behind what they're saying, right? Whereas so much of, especially in corporate, so much can kind of it's real like fly by night kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It really doesn't mean anything, and it's just language that people use. I think I kicked off my attempt at influencing L&D with a post that kind of questioned the evidence base behind 70-20-10. And it still pains me because sometimes I'm in front of a client and they will cite that back, and I'm too polite to be like, hey.
Yeah.
It's an important thing.
Yeah. I think that's one of the, I don't want to say downsides, but one of the challenges is when the literature and you know the literature from a time perspective, right? So is it dated? Is it recent? You understand the science, but like the research methods, and then how to appropriately extrapolate information and apply it. And so often, my PhD is in adult learning. And so I'll read these online articles that are about adult learners, and it's simply a list of one very small segment of the theory around adult learners. And that's it. It's just like, oh, this is who they are. And so it's challenging. I find it to be challenging sometimes to correct, make those corrections or dispel some of the assumptions that people have with that information that's floating out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, comes back in kind of different guises as well. So people will often kind of generalize out from stuff to do with 70-20-10, or I find the most problematic kind of myth out there is or maybe it's not a myth, but it's this kind of general denigration of all forms of formal learning. I think it's the discovery learning myth. I find it's quite useful to apply that theory of what's biologically secondary and primary and secondary knowledge, right? So just because as a child you learn how to walk and speak by bumping around and interacting with the world doesn't mean we can expect someone to become a great project manager without exposing them to any kind of training. But it's quite pervasive, and I worry about it, because I think one of the things that we tend to do is say, well, because in many ways, someone completing an online course kind of in isolation without any kind of any way to apply it in their job is quite similar really to just informal learning, and it's not really going to help them build a skill. But then often people will use, vendors in particular, will try to turn engagement metrics into upskilling data. And it just doesn't really, like companies like Coursera or LinkedIn Learning, Coursera in particular, I think they do feel quite strongly about the quality of their courses. But then I've also heard, I don't know if you've heard this, but there are some people in companies that are like serial course completers. They basically just complete loads of courses. And they almost do it instead of working, and it sounds bad to kind of like, it sounds a bit incorrect, a bit nasty to say, well, there are these kind of people who are doing it to kind of avoid having to be held to account for more work. But there definitely are. There's kind of leisure learning, isn't there, that's harder to pin any ROI to.
It is, and it's I don't want to fault or criticize, that's the better choice of words. I don't want to criticize anyone for identifying they want to learn a new skill set, apply it, potentially use it as a source of income. I'm all for it. The challenge for me is when in the marketplace, when there is this, I can do these things, like I can ensure that you have these outcomes. And every business is different. And so you're taking this one approach, this very singular and tightly bound approach, and attempting to apply it to every single company without making the adjustment for context, the employee, the culture, people's prior learning experiences. And that's, to the post that got us connected, that's really where the human part of it comes from. And I am a humanist and advocate for that element of it. Like, let's really construct our content and our learning experiences around the learner, not around the employee, not around the government guidelines, but around the individual as a learner. And so sometimes I see things, Toby, and I get so frustrated, or I'll meet people like yourself and I get fired up. Like I need a nap after the conversation because I'm so worked up about it.
Yeah. It's Well, it's not great to think about, and I think, yeah, I'd agree, and I think it applies. Learning is a particularly bad symptom of this kind of top down,
Mhm.
kind of inappropriately crude like systems thinking, but it does
Yeah.
apply a lot in organizations and almost any gear. I think I can't remember who the original quote is, like, if you can give me the best performer in the world and I can crush them with a bad system, which is really true.
Right.
um
Right.
but
Right.
L&D learning is particularly bad, like, for all these kind of bad systems. It just really, they also tend to associate learning in people's heads with something really bad. Like, I don't know
Yes.
what you have stateside, because like you guys do tend to do things a bit better than we do. But my wife, past 2-3 years, has worked for a big company, for L'Oreal, so I got to see a lot of the stuff I hear about from clients like close up. But like, one of the best things that happens is you log on, and you basically can't access your computer properly because you need to complete X amount of e-learning courses in order to be able to get access. It sometimes amount to 5 hours, but there's usually problems in the system. Like, you basically can't, often you can't get the login to complete the e-learning because you've not done the e-learning. Or like, the other thing they do is they assign people, if you sign up to do a course, you have to complete it, you have to attend, otherwise your department will be fined. And the very worst thing is the application of 70-20-10, whereby senior people, this isn't necessarily her company, it's actually pervasive, I've seen it in lots of companies, where they actually believe that you have to spend 10% of your actual time completing formal learning courses. And then you get to this kind of like, we need how many, 500 hours of learning per person per year.
Right.
So
Oh
it's
my
just really
goodness.
mad, isn't it? You take something that's kind of has an element of good to it. If someone said, I spend a lot of time doing courses, I'd be like, great, that's awesome, that's
Yeah.
really good. But then you apply it to the system and suddenly you've just got this nightmare. This is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard anyone articulate it in that way, but you're absolutely right. When we look at the system that's in play, where, that surrounds the learning, it completely diminishes not only the value of the content, but the experience of the individual and then their ability to actually use it. And
Yeah.
what I've seen so often in conversations with businesses is we need more training. We need more training.
Yeah.
And I completely argue we do not need more training. You need to reevaluate the training that you have. Because if in fact it is a government mandate or whatever the case may be, the information is what it is. The problem is how is it being facilitated? And back to your point, oh, you can't get on the computer unless you do the training, but you need to use your computer to do the training. Like, that's nonsense. Like, the whole way in which things are coordinated, it ultimately does a disservice to the individual. And that's where my heart always goes. It goes to the employee and the impact that their work experience has on their family or on their personal life
Hmm.
once they
Yeah.
leave the workplace. And so I often tell people that, yes, my work is with a client, a business. But when I think about my heart is often thinking about who is, in fact, is the end user and the touch that they have.
Yeah, I really like that method. I mean, for me, it started at 10, 12 years ago when I first started working in a space, and I'd be going to work to help develop bespoke like e-learning courses, often compliance courses of big consultancies. I'd be sat on the bus behind two young people who just joined a consultancy, complaining about the 30 hours of e-learning they had to do in order to start doing their job. And then it just, as you go through your career, you just, especially on the vendor side, you can find yourself working on big projects that are just completely pointless, and no one's ready to admit it. But I do, yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the things we were trying to do with the content chaos piece was try and turn this negativity into more of an opportunity to make a difference, because I think it's basically true that in L&D, some people's jobs are actually making the situation worse, and they're making the employee experience worse, and they're only there because no one's been brave enough to kind of say
Right,
this, we should stop doing this. But on the
right,
other hand, you can't really go about making things better by castigating L&D for doing so bad, because they've got a lot of good excuses, you know, as to why they've been made to do that.
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I actually have a health background. So I was trained in sports medicine. Early in my career, I worked in university athletics, and then I was recruited to be a professor in sports medicine. So that's really where the bulk of my career lands. And then, over that time, I got my PhD in adult learning. And so the world of L&D is not like, it doesn't course through my veins, it really is around. I was the person who had to take these continuing education units year after year after year to maintain my healthcare credential. And like you're saying, for me at least, early on, it was good information, but that's because I was a novice. And as I gained more experience and expertise, the quality of those training opportunities significantly decreased. And so it's when I entered this space of L&D and have conversations with people who are also in L&D, but also businesses, you are so right. There is a complete disconnect, sadly.
And how do you go about helping people to change that? What's the first thing you do when you come in to help a client and you kind of see this situation of they think more training is the answer, but there's too much training in the first place. They need to reevaluate, but maybe they are making some assumptions that aren't right. It must be like a micro change management process you need to do with these people, right?
It is. And so I never initially attack the content. I don't do that, but rather I engage them in conversation about the end user. And I have, two questions in particular that I ask them, can you answer this question about your employees or your staff or clients or whatever? Consistently, no one has been able to answer the question. And I explained to them, this is the issue. The issue is you don't know this information, you don't understand it, and you are now creating content and experiences in the absence of this critical piece of information. So let's explore that. Let's explore the content, and then let's start to audit the content and the way things are designed and built. And so that has, for me, that approach or that process has really been beneficial. And I'm still waiting for the first day to have a client who I ask these questions to, and they can give me a solid answer. And over the course of 2 years, it has not happened.
What are some examples? Assuming you're not giving away too much commercially sensitive material, what are those questions? What are some examples of those questions?
Yeah, so I had a business that was they helped with social services. So in the States, their focus is child, youth, and family services that they need. And it was for the staff. Lots and lots and lots of trainings, just lots of trainings going on. And I said, oh, okay, that's great. What are the values of the organization? And how does that match with who goes through these trainings? Like, that's an example. That's not my proprietary process, but that's an example of the question. And the individuals, I had them in a forum and there were about 4 or 5 people. Not one of them from the same organization could answer those questions. And it's unfortunate, it's a roundabout, well, this is what we do. Well, that's very general, right? You provide services, you train your staff. That's very general. Let's take a deeper dive to that question. And they can't.
So there's a couple of things that jump out to me there is often when things are wrong or not going right, it's people can't identify what their organization does that's unique or different, the unique value they add. and so they don't have a good guide to make those calls and to say this is or isn't right. It's like just assuming
Right.
everything must be okay. And the
Right.
other thing that I wanted to draw out from what you said is the use of the word values, because I remember the heyday of values in kind of corporate speak, and I
Yeah.
feel like in L&D it's kind of been replaced by this harder sounding talk about skills. And I think we might have gone too far in the other direction, because skills are obviously what we're after, people being able to do stuff better and differently, and for organization to change. But the skills, they begin in values, don't they? Because unless you have the values to support effort, because that's
Yeah.
what it does, it motivates. Unless you can motivate everyone,
Yeah.
you don't get skill development. But we're a bit wary of values now. We're told, oh, that's not a skill, so it doesn't count. Curiosity is a value, not a skill, so I'm not interested. Like, yeah, I think I am interested in it still.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And it's unfortunate, because then when there isn't this understanding of the values and some of the other elements, there again, they are starting to build these learning experiences that are mismatched. Sadly, they are mismatched. So immediately you have disengaged people attempting to go through the learning process. And one of the things that I've learned over the years, and admittedly, I became this person in my previous life, is I got to get through this training. What's the quickest way for me to get through it? What are the questions at the end? Let me talk to somebody else who's done it, and that is not a learning experience. That is simply moving through the motions to complete a task. And when you are looking at return on investment from a business, and you have employees who are not being compliant, or there's a reduction in productivity or loss of revenue for whatever the reason, you can always link it back to how engaged were they with the training. That indicates how much of the information they're going to retain. And that leads to their ability to apply the skills. And so, my business is around that process. Like, let's attend to engagement. And then based on the factors that we identify for engagement, we can now intentionally build for information retention and skills application. And it's consistently, I've seen that's not what's happening.
Yeah, I once we were doing a project with one of the largest global banks, and we were just taking apart their compliance training and seeing how we could filter it. And I needed to get to the end of each module to audit how much stuff was in each module and things, and what the personalization routes were through it. And I to my delight, I had developed the ability from a few years of doing a lot of writing of multiple choice questions to be able to answer the assessment correctly and pass, despite clearly not being an investment banker who knows the relevant compliance legislation. It's like it reminds me of that famous story of Hans the horse, a German horse that everyone believed could understand human language in the 19th century and was toured around everywhere. Ask him a question, you'd ask him to, like, nod once or whatever, shake a hoof if say yes, and do something else to say no, and he always got it right. And it's an incredibly intelligent horse, but the horse wasn't understanding the question, it was just reading the person asking the question. And I think actually with e-learning, that practice has developed to quite a high degree now, kind of that people feel their way around it. And it's just the opposite of what we want. They're just gaming that engagement. And it's interesting you said there's ways to kind of slice it and pull it apart, because that engagement, that means nothing. That's like, I've got 100% compliance completions. Well, that you've just got a lot of Hansa horses who are really good at reading the game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And when I talk about engagement, it's how much does the individual see themselves in what you're talking about or what's being presented to them. Is the information being completed and presented in a way that is completely foreign to them, or can they draw on past experiences? Is it part of like their career path or their life path that they want to go, and so they can actually insert themselves in it. And yet again, that is not happening, and so it's not a human-centered experience. It really isn't. And there's lots of trends out there. I consistently get asked about gaming and gamification. Admittedly, I'm on the fence, right? I love to play games in my personal life, but as it relates to work and training, what, like, I always struggle with, it is not a true source of engagement.
Yeah.
If it's the Fitbit, and like I walk, right? And so I upped my steps this summer. Every time I open the app, the confetti flows and all of that. I love that, but it's related to walking. It's not in conjunction with a learning experience. And that's where the theory comes in. And so back to your earlier point about how people are, out there doing the work, but their work isn't grounded in theory and it's not grounded in research. That's where I come in and say, I fully understand the research and the theory and can interpret it and apply it appropriately to your circumstance. And I haven't been convinced as it relates of gaming.
Yeah, I think so. It is a big debate. But you can be certain if there was a good way to do it, then it probably wouldn't be applied, in the way we build content anyway and systems. I have more things I'd like to ask you, but I know we're coming to the end of the time that we scheduled. It would be really interesting to collaborate in some way. I actually think there's probably some safe for TV parts we could pull out of a conversation we just had and use as some content, actually. I'd be quite interested in, we're trying to, as a follow-up to the content chaos piece, we're trying to publish, even for ourselves to understand it better, our framework for what the solution is. And we came up with a set of things you can do with the content, but in the middle, we kind of made it like a hub, and we put the step of prioritization or prioritize needs in the middle, because that's a button you just need to keep pressing. Like, you can't do enough prioritizing of what's important. And I think what you've spoken about, the questions, it's all about, for us, it's all about questions. It's not really about a big, massive skill framework that takes, 6 months to produce, not even, dare I say it, from a kind of data-driven company, about like lots and lots of data. I think questions you're mentioning are the most important ones, that, and I know that we have some co-thinkers here in the UK, a company called Solve Together, who think in exactly the same way. So that would be cool if you're up for it, and kind of including something from yourself, maybe in that report in some way.
Yeah, I would be honored to, and always opportunities to engage in the conversation. And admittedly, Toby, I see things on, in the social marketplace. I'm like, maybe it's me, right? Like, everyone's doing this. Maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm off. And then the beautiful thing is I have, conversations with like-minded people who get the theory, get the research, and how to appropriately apply it. I'm like, nah, it's not me. It's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Don't believe the hype.
That's right. That's right. But yes, I have really enjoyed our conversation, and am definitely open to sharing insights and collaborating in the future for sure.
Cool. Well, let me take a look at this recording and see what I can pull out that might be like a draft I can send back to you, and then we can send something over within a few weeks, and we can catch up again on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd be honored. And if you get the opportunity, I would really appreciate it if you could share with me the recording in its raw.
Oh yeah,
because there's parts of our conversation that I want to draw out in text.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I will do. We record them in a way that gives you the whole transcript as well, so I'll share that with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for reaching out, Carrie, and have a great day today.
Thank you. You too. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much. All right, speak soon then. Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.